you. We'll be starting shortly. Just waiting for more people to come through. There's a bit of a road jam.
The things of this world are counted as lost.
Stage to take your seats, please. Craig Jameson, Val Bartman, Gary Tachman. And can I ask the president of SA Rugby Legends, Gavin Viridis, to take his seat as well. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is John Allen, and I will be your MC today. Welcome to the guys that are streaming, whether it be YouTube or Facebook or any other social media platforms. I'm not quite a fan with all the social media platforms, but welcome. It's all around the world. Give them a good round of applause as well, because they've made an effort. Firstly, on behalf of the sports communities, with their family and friends, our condolences go to Rona, Ross, Craig, Evan, and their families. They have lost a father and a grandfather. May God hold them all in the palm of his hand over this sad period. As players, we have lost a coach and a mentor. As supporters, you have lost a legend and a rugby giant. Today, we are here to celebrate the life of that rugby giant, Ian McIntosh. I'd like to start with a quote from Mark Greenaway's article on Sunday, titled "Rest in Peace, Ian McIntosh, a scholar and a gentleman." The quote goes, "Rugby has, for me, always been a drug. At some moment in my early days, I must have been injected with it. And I've had a deep craving for the game ever since." It was these words that Ian McIntosh began his autobiography, Mac, the Face of Rugby. An apt title, given that famous 1,000-yard stare the TV cameras loved when the pained Springbok and Sharks coach was not so much wearing his heart on his sleeve, but wearing it on his face. We will hear today from friends, family, and captains of Natal and Sharks Rugby who were coached by Mac. And in between, I will tell you a few stories and a few tales. Mac was honoured by World Rugby with the Vernon Pugh Award for Distinguished Service in 2013. But in 2023, I would like to ask SA Rugby that they propose to World Rugby that Ian McIntosh's name is included in Rugby's Hall of Fame, as he deserved it more than anyone. Wait for it. You've jumped the gun, wait for it. The reason I say this is, besides his coaching accolades of being the only international coach to coach both the 15s and the 7s, as well as coaching 2 countries, and with the Sharks, 4 Currie Cup medals, 2 Super Rugby finals, that alone is good enough reason. But that's not the main reason. This accolade is mainly for what he did with SA Rugby Legends, where he organised and helped coach 30,000 kids per year. And he has been doing that for the last 22 years. So as a hooker, I can do the maths. 660,000 kids Mac has given hope and opportunity to play the game of rugby. No other coach in any sport has done that. And that is the reason I believe he should be inducted into World Rugby's Hall of Fame. If you agree with me, clap your hands so hard that SA Rugby and the World Rugby can hear you. Now that you can clap your hands. Earlier today, we had a private ceremony with family and friends to say goodbye to Mac. Now it's your turn to say goodbye. Say goodbye to your rugby giant. To start, I would like to ask the St. Martin's Rector, Reverend Kevin Robinson, to share with us a spiritual message. Kevin, if you please come to the stage.
Thank you very much. Yes, my name's Kevin Robertson. I'm the minister at St. Martin's Church in Durban North, where Mac and his family were faithful members for many years. In preparing for the funeral service, which we had at 2 o'clock, the family suggested a couple of readings, and I reflected on some aspects of Mac's life. The good news, you're not getting that whole sermon. But it is appropriate that in this context we reflect on Mac as a spiritual man, and something of that is what made him who he is. And the first reading the family chose from the old book of the Proverbs in many ways epitomizes this man. So listen carefully to Proverbs 3. My son, don't forget all I've taught you. Take to heart my commands. They'll help you live a long, long time, a long life lived full and well. Don't lose your grip on love and loyalty. Tie them round your neck, carve them initials on your heart. Earn a reputation for living well in God's eyes and the eyes of the people. Trust God from the bottom of your heart. Don't try to figure out everything on your own. Listen for God's voice in everything you do, everywhere you go. He's the one who will keep you on track. Don't assume that you know it all. Run to God. Run from evil. Honor God with everything you own. Give Him the first and the best. And so as we gather to celebrate the life of Master Mac, I reminded the congregation that Mac had a master. Mac's master was Jesus. And Master Jesus animated all aspects of his life to the core of his being. And so it's appropriate as we celebrate his life to acknowledge the one who gave us his life to celebrate. As we gather in this stadium, it is obviously to celebrate one aspect of Mac's life as a rugby coach, as a rugby legend. And so using briefly, as I did in the sermon, some analogies from rugby, allow me to reflect with you on his spiritual life. The game of life for Mac and for us should be to score that try in our relationship with God. Try stands for trust, respect, and yield, T-R-Y. The trust. Ian Mac trusted God with all of his heart, and that security of his identity gave him the confidence with which he lived his life. R stands for respect. Ian's respect for God allowed him to show respect for others in his humble way. Y stands for yield. Ian sought to yield all aspects of his life to God in faithful servants, his time, his money, and his commitments. But in a try, it's no good unless you convert. And we all know that to convert a try is to kick it through the goal posts. In Christianity, conversion has a different meaning. meaning we hand over the game plan of our life to God. And Mac, our master, knew his master and allowed him to play the game plan of life from a deepened perspective because he understood his master's game plan. Friends, Mac has converted his life and is now with God in heaven. When you want to convert a try, you must attempt to kick the ball through the posts. The important thing is to aim through the posts, not at the posts. When you swing a golf club, as Mac loved to do, the aim is to follow through with your swing. And the idea of follow through, of aiming beyond the goalposts of life, is what Christian conversion is all about. We aim to follow through. We live this life not for the tries of the moment, but for the ultimate try. We convert by going through with our life's commitments so that we too will enjoy the eternal after party in heaven where Mac is now. Only one person on the team kicks that final conversion, and then the whole team wins and celebrates. Jesus has kicked that final conversion, and we are the winners, and we too can celebrate. And so, friends, Ian McIntosh made conscious choices about who his master was and how to live his life by God's game plan. And today, as I look at his face staring at me with those eyes, looking from a distance with that passion, I urge you, with his passion, that stare of his eye, that twinkle of humor, to, like he did, take God seriously as you honor Ian McIntosh's memory. Let us pray. Merciful Father and Lord of all life, we thank you for the opportunity to gather here this evening. We thank you that each one of us is made in your image, and in our own way we reflect something of your truth and your light. As we gather, we give you thanks for the life of your son Ian. We thank you for what you did in him and how he shared your love among us. Above all, we rejoice at your gracious promise to all your servants, living and departed, that we shall rise again with Christ, and that nothing, neither death nor life, can separate us from your love as expressed and confirmed in Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. We pray this afternoon that as we gather to celebrate Ian's life, you will enable us to, and you would bless this wonderful occasion. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thanks, Kevin. Can I call up Mac's eldest son, Ross McIntosh, to talk about his dad's early career?
Okay, well, thanks, John. Can you hear me, everyone? All good. All right. So thanks for getting here, guys. It's as it's been mentioned, we've just had a really nice service, nice send-off for Dad at St. Martin's. And we'd just like to join you now and share a little bit into Dad's life. I think this being more the celebration. And it has been put together, and what I've been tasked with doing, what we'd like to do is we've done sort of a timeline of Dad's life, just significant events in it. And Ev, my younger bit, will do the timeline from when we got to South Africa, obviously knowing that we came and spent time in Zimbabwe. And I will do the Zimbabwe stuff. All right, so where did it all start? I mean, McIntosh, the name is Scottish. Yes, and we do have Scottish blood in us. Not as much as Mr. Glaswegian here, 100%er, but we do have some Scottish blood. And it was actually Dad's grandfather, who came out quite a way back. He came out to South Africa in those days as a stonemason. And a stonemason, as the guys in the building industry will know, are the guys that are responsible for that cornerstone in the building. So quite an important skill that was needed. And our great-granddad Mac came out as the first guy here. And he came from a place called Dundee, and that's where the McIntosh clan, that's where we hung out, we originated. And that, John, I think also, as you know, that's close to Inverness. It's the cold part of Scotland. So we were quite a hardy bunch. Anyway, so our great-grandfather had Dad's dad. So our granddad Mac was born in Charlestown, and he married my dad's mom, Muriel, who was from the Matatiel area. Nice farming area down the coast. And really wonderful folks. And throughout Dad's life, he made sure he kept in touch with that side of his family. Really lovely people. For some reason, I don't know why, the McIntosh clan then decided to go and base in Newcastle, of all places. And that's where the McIntosh base was, in South Africa. And there are still quite a few McIntoshes in Newcastle. From there, Grandpa Mac moved to Kwekwe, and that's where the Zim chapter started. So he got transferred, I don't know how, but he got transferred or ended up there, and he was the town clerk of this little town called Kwekwe in Zimbabwe. And Kwekwe is on the road between Bulawayo and Harare. You can say it's just closer to Bulawayo. It's about 160 k's out. And that's where Grandpa Mac actually got transferred to as the town clerk. And quite a distinguished chap, because he actually got awarded the OBE for his services as the town clerk there. Yeah, so that's where our granddad went, and that's where Dad was born. He was born there on the 24th of September, 1938, and he was one of the 3 kids. He was the third of 4 kids. So he had his eldest brother Magnus, then there was the eldest sister Ira, Dad came along, and then the Lord Lamaki, John. And they had a lovely life up there in Kwekwe. I think my generation, I know I was fortunate enough to get a bit of that, running around in the bush after school, swimming in the rivers. It left a lot of time for mischief, which Dad certainly got up to. And I'll tell you a few stories afterwards about he got into a lot of trouble up there. And it didn't really help with the old man being the town clerk. And in fact, was a little bit of an embarrassment to the family. But anyway, Dad was a naughty guy. So he did his junior school there, Kwekwe Junior School. That was from 1945 to 1950. And with his dad being quite a technical guy, 1951, when he started his senior years, he was dispatched or told to go to Gifford Technical School, which is pretty much like the George Campbell in Durban here. So off Mac went as a youngster. It was quite a long train ride, and it meant boarding school for Dad. So as a youngster, boarding school is quite tough, and especially in those years for Dad. But what was quite lacquer for Dad is that Uncle Mag was quite a main guy at school. He played first-team rugby, he opened the bowling first-team cricket, he was head of house, etc. So when Dad got there, he had a lot of support from the senior guys. But then suddenly everything changed. Uncle Mag left. He went on to study at university as an electrical engineer. And Dad's mom died. Bang. At boarding school to get that kind of news. It absolutely devastated Dad. And it's something he has missed his whole life. I think he was 14. It really was. Because, it was one of those old school families. He had to call his dad Sir. And Ma was the love of his family. So unfortunately, that was just ripped away from Dad at an early age. And I think the reason why he's put so much love into our family and to all those around him, he just really missed his Ma. But anyway, Dad pushed through. He managed to finish school. And even to make matters worse, he never grew at school. He actually wore the same blazer in Form 1 as he did in Form 6 or Matric. So he was a tiny guy. He never grew. And Ev, they should have sent him to army maybe. Huh? Anyway, personal private joke. But so he was a really small guy at school, and crazy about his rugby as he's ever been, but just never grew. But nevertheless, he managed to make first team. He had a couple of first teams for games for Gifford Tech. Anyway, it was only after school, Dad left school, and it was only after school they found out that he had bilharzia. So like a lot of Zimbos, I think more Zimbos than anyone get it, is swimming in the rivers. It's quite common up there in Zims. And they diagnosed that, sorted it out, and then he started to grow. And this was really great for Dad's rugby career, because all of a sudden he started growing. Dad at school was actually quite quick, given his side. I think his mates, Uncle Don and that, you'll know, he was quite a good, well, he knows the 440, which is the 400 meters. He ran the 440 and the 800, the 880 yards quite well. So he was a good athlete, and he dabbled in a bit of boxing, believe it or not. So it wasn't just all rugby, and he loved his boxing. So if you speak to Dad, which we might keep a secret, and we'll put that as a question later, who his best rugby player was ever. But we can tell you his best ever sportsman, ever, was Cassius Clay. He just had the utmost respect for Cassius Clay. So what Dad did after school, he had a brief stint with the Internal Affairs up there in a lovely place of the country in the Eastern Highlands called Malseta. So the Eastern Highlands of Zims has got these lovely mountains, and Dad spent a year up there. Growing and training and getting into his rugby. And I think maybe that's where Dad loved the mountains. And I think that is where he got it from. But I mean, who wouldn't? The mountains are really beautiful. And it was really cowboy stuff when Dad was there. He used to ride into town on a horse, tie it up on the horse pole, go do shopping, ride back home, chuck wood into the fire, feed his dog. That sort of life. So he loved it. He had a great time there, but he couldn't do that forever. So then what he decided on, he wasn't going to go the technical electrical engineering route, and he went into teaching. He was going to be a teacher. And with that, I think because of his, he was in very good nick. He was a physical specimen. I think he was going to be a PE teacher, Ma. I think that was the dream. So anyway, he went to Teachers Training College in Bulawayo, and that's where Ma, also being a teacher, and Auntie Da, funny enough, and our daughter, our niece, funny enough. So there's a bit of teaching in the McIntosh profession. That's where Mom and Dad met. They met at Teachers Training College. And there's a story to that as well, which I'll let Ma maybe share a little bit later. And it was during this time, as I said, he was a good sportsman. He was a good athlete, and his position was flank. And it says in his book, he was like a Graham Heifer. He had an engine he could go on forever. He was obviously quite quick. So typical Graham Heifer style, he was all over to the players, first to the ball, there for the inside, and he could tackle. Dad was apparently quite good. So at a young age, actually as a student, he made the Matabeleland senior provincial side. And you've got to understand that side was pretty potent. And Uncle Don, if I remember, I think Uncle Des van Jaarsveld, captain. There were some meneers in that side. And I mean, Dad, who he was playing against, Piet Grayling, I think was also one of, these are proper guys Dad was playing against. So anyway, we had a lot of them running around up in Rhodesia at that time, Zimbabwe. So Dad was doing well, but unfortunately for him, his dreams, he wanted to play for Rhodes, he wanted to play for Zims, but his dreams were shattered. He had a serious knee injury. So that was that. In those days, they don't have the technology we do now, so his cruciates went very badly. It was just game over as far as playing rugby was for Dad. But not to worry, he was going to carry on, and he was just going to take up coaching. Now, I think what you must understand in Zims, Rhodesia those days, I think you must just get a sense of the lifestyle. I'm sure it was pretty similar down here in SA in that era. But life revolved very much about family, friends, and the sports club. All right. So we had our circle of family and friends, and we're very blessed still to be in connection and see each other quite regularly nowadays. But our sports club was Queen's Sports Club. All right. So all Dad's mates were from Queen's Sports Clubs. And Uncle Don, I think we tolerated the opposition, OMs. I mean, Queen Sports Club was where, that is where the famous, we've got an international cricket ground there, and still there's a lot of internationals are played there. But when Zims played cricket in Bulawayo, it was at Queen Sports Club. And I think we let OAMs come watch, Uncle Don. We let them in. Okay. But just on that, I remember there was one famous incident, and if we had maybe Les Orchard, one of the golf guys, was at Dad's funeral, so he's a big cricketing man. But I remember there was, as a youngster, there was, little Zims. As well as their rugby, they really did quite well in cricket. I think it was against Eastern Province, and then it was a league format. And it basically boiled down, whoever won that match would win the cup or the championship title. And it was at Queen's. And it was the Eastern Province side, quite powerful, captained by, I think, Laurie Wilmot. He was a chap at Queen's. And I'm not too sure what happened, but there was a bit of controversy. There was a couple of wickets either we had to get or... But anyway, the match was stopped short, and there was some, I think, unsportsmanlike behavior from the Eastern Province guys. And they had to run and lock themselves in the change room because of the unhappy crowd. And I know Uncle Don would have been there because Dad was there, Uncle Don. So he was banging on that door. But that's just one of the fond memories we have from the Queen's era. So anyway, it went without saying, if Dad was going to start coaching, he was going to go start coaching at his sports club, and that was Queen's. And that's where he started coaching, and it wasn't long before he progressed to coaching the provincial side, which was Matabeleland, and then taking over from Des van Jaarsveld as the Zimbabwean, or the then Rhodesia national rugby side. And that was in 1970, I think it was. So Dad coached Zimbabwe, or Rhodesia then, from 1971 to 1976, with the stint in 1980. And I think we must realize Rhodesia's, the then Rhodesia side, everyone. It was, quite a small country, and it really always punched above its weight. So during Dad's time, we were still in the B section, but we played a lot of A section sides, pretty much like Natal in the old days. But we had some famous victories against Northern Transvaal, Free State, and Natal. And in fact, 1973, as a B section team, we made the Currie Cup semi-final, unfortunately losing to Northern Transvaal. But as youngsters growing up, we absolutely idolized our men in green and white. I mean, they were our heroes, and Dad was involved in coaching and involved with them. And they really played an attractive style of rugby. It was attacking, uncompromising, committed rugby. And it was a delight to watch, and we're just super proud of our dad being involved with that team. But as I say, that sort of petered out for Dad. So 76 he left, and he came back 1980s to coach Natal again. To coach Zimbabwe then again. A brief stint, and then he sort of settled into a working life with the Rhodesian breweries at that time. And it's a fantastic company. I know SAB down here, also a brilliant company to work for. And Dad was really, very, very happy with the breweries. And Ma well settled in her teaching profession. So with the whole family nicely settled at the turn of independence in what was Rhodesia to become Zimbabwe, there was just a sudden decision at the end of '83 to come to South Africa. And I must admit, it took the Butts and I a bit by surprise. It was a bolt out the blue. And that's what it was. So left Zims, packed up everything, off to Durban, and the next chapter, the South African chapter of Ian McIntosh, had begun.
Thanks, Ross. Okay, we're here to celebrate the life of Ian McIntosh. There's many stories I could tell. In fact, I could probably write a trilogy, but I'll keep it to a few. The one that springs to mind first is the time jumped off a mountain and paraglided into training. So how it actually happened is we'd played a game on a Saturday. against Otago. And the Sunday was our R&R time. We were going to Queenstown in New Zealand. So at the end of the game, Kevin Putt had scored a try, and the ref had disallowed the try. So we're in the change rooms, and Mac says to Putty, "Putty, did you score that try?" Putty says, "Yes, Mac, I did." So he says to us, "Okay, let's treat this as a win." So we had a party that night. But then Sunday came, and he woke up, and he read the newspapers. And the newspapers obviously said that we lost. So in Queenstown, you're supposed to relax. And Mac got on the bus and he said, "Okay, boys, training this afternoon." So we drive the 3-hour trip to Queenstown. So while on the bus, I decide, I say to the players, or some of the players, that you know how I'm normally a bit late, and Mac I'm on my last warning, because he was very strict, disciplinarian. There's many players he kicked off that field when they came late and never to be play again. So I said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump off, because the training pitch is the bottom of a mountain in Queenstown. So I read in this, you look at all the gump that you're going to, that you can paraglide. So I said, I'm going to paraglide with my kit on into training, but I'm going to time it right. So just as you gather up in a little huddle, I'll land just then. Anyway, so I go up to the mountain. I get to the top, then I realize I'm scared of heights. So I'm starting to panic. Anyway, I've got my kit on, I've got my boots on. And then the guys tell me exactly what I have to do. If you think I ran out the tunnel fast, you should have seen me run off that mountain. Believe you me, I ran. Anyway, so we're spiraling down, and I can see the guys getting together. And as I'm getting closer and closer, I can see Mac looking around, and he's saying, "Where's John?" So the players said, "No, well, we saw him about an hour ago." "I don't know, Mac. I don't know where he is." So now I'm getting closer and closer, and I can see Mac getting irritated. He says, No, someone must know where John is." And as Mac was getting more and more irritated, the players started whining, but they started laughing, because they could see me just above the training session. And as they started laughing, Mac obviously got more and more pissed off. So he always wore that cap. So he put his cap, he slammed it on the ground. And he said, "That's it, I've had enough. Alan is on the next plane. I'm sending him back to South Africa. I've had enough." And just at that moment I landed, unclipped the button. I said to him, "Mac, am I late for training?" The look on his face was priceless. He looked at me, and he looked at the mountain, and he just started pissing himself laughing. That's our Mac. Okay, it gives me great pleasure to invite on stage Mac's best mate, Don Hatton, who's going to do an ode to Ian McIntosh.
Where my courage is, let my heart find strength in your presence. So I'll walk through the fire with my head lifted high, and my spirit revived in your story.
Good evening, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank Rona and the family for allowing me to read out this ode to Mac. Much appreciated. I love you. Our mate Mac. So closes another chapter in the McIntosh tale. A fond farewell, and he's off on a new trail. So much success for a new look Natal. What a story the 90s will tell. 4 times in the decade, the Currie Cup was won, with the first for the province since the great contest begun. Super 12 glory too on the subcontinent parks. SA's most feared combination, the Natal Sharks. At the head of this endeavour, keeping them on track, one of rugby's most respected, our mate Mac. Some say genius, others say inventive. A deep love of the sport, his driving incentive, eyes ablaze and passion aflame. What a mark he's left on this wonderful game. Springbok honours too, though he was soon shown the gate. A few of South Africa's finest have suffered that kind of fate. A true character and a lovable rogue. He reinvented direct rugby and placed it globally in vogue. And what a memory for names. He just couldn't learn them any faster. Everyone he met was simply called Master. It all started back in Bulawayo at that famous club Queens. Back in the 60s, only yesterday it seems. Those were the days almost hazed in amnesia. Coach in the 70s of little Rhodesia. With glorious fishing on the mighty Zambezi, what glorious times, fun was so easy. But alas, it's time to move on towards challenges new. And you do so with every blessing to Rona family and you. It is with much happiness and not sadness that we watch you depart. But we sure are going to miss you, Mac, and that comes from the heart.
Thank you, Don. That's a beautiful ode. That's good poetry. I'm a bit of a poet, and it even rhymed. And you get up and down that stairs better than me as well, so there's hope for me yet. Okay, I'd like to call up Mac's middle son, Evan, to share the timeline of his dad in South Africa.
Thank you, John. It's the youngest. Just.
Okay.
Thank you very much, everyone, for being here this evening. So in 1984, Dad lived a happy and content life in Zimbabwe to come down to South Africa with one key requirement of the move. I have to live near the sea. And so Durban was chosen. In 1986, 2 years after arrival, Dad was appointed the Natal senior coach here at the Natal. In 1987, a fortuitous promotion to the Currie Cup A division paved the way for top-tier Currie Cup rugby. And in 1990, Natal beat Northern Transvaal 18-12 in Pretoria to win the Currie Cup title for the first time in their centenary year. In 1992, Natal won the Currie Cup for the second time, beating Transvaal 14-13 at Ellis Park, and I'm pretty sure Gary Teichmann's jaw is still sore from that try. In 1993 to 1994, against all prevailing logic at the time, Dad was appointed the Springbok coach. In 1994, fired as the Springbok coach following the last outgoing New Zealand rugby tour. The dream of going to a World Cup was gone. In 1995, he returned to the Natal coaching role, winning back-to-back Currie Cup titles, beating Western Province 25-17 at Kings Park and the Golden Lions 33-15 at Ellis Park. The dawn of the professional rugby era in 1996 saw the inaugural Super Rugby introduced, which the Sharks reached the final to be beaten 45-21 by the Blues in Auckland. In 1999 was retirement from the Sharks, which ended with a sad home game final loss 32-19 to the Golden Lions. In 1999, following the retirement, ironically, Dad stayed in the rugby longer than his time at the Natal Sharks. From 2000 to 2023, Dad took up many roles within the South African rugby community and abroad. In 2001 to 2002, coached a season at Welsh club Newport. In 2001, on the return, he took up the head coach of the SA Rugby Legends. In 2003, Dad was the Springbok Sevens coach. In 2006, Dad was part of the IRB Experimental Law Variation Committee, where he got to work with a lot of his well-respected friends in the rugby fraternity. In 2007, the World Cup dream was realized, being included in the 2007 Rugby World Cup winning squad as a selector. In 2013, Dad was presented with the World Rugby's Vernon Pugh Award for distinguished services to the game. In 2005 to 2018, Dad spent 13 years as a Springbok selector and served under 5 different Springbok coaches: Jake White, Peter de Villiers, Heineke Meyer, and Alistair Coetzee, and Rassie Erasmus. Following all the years, he was graciously awarded the naming of the entrance gate here at Kings Park on Kings Park 1. With great sadness, 2 years a week ago, Dad was to pass away, aged 84, at Umhlanga Hospital. We love you, Dad. Rest in peace.
Thank you, Evan, the youngest of the McIntosh boys. I'm a hooker. You don't have the odd bad throw. And I did say odd. I apologize for the trains that are coming past and making noise. I thought Transnet had gone bung. Probably the only train in South Africa working right now. Anyway, my next story actually took place right here in this field, in that corner there. Well, we were in that corner right the way to the polls. We became the fittest team on the planet. Have you heard of the beep test? Hands up. Well, the rugby players, hands up, the beep test. You know what that is? So how the beep test works is you put Kevin Stevenson, I don't know if Kevin's here today, he was our fitness coach. Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong. How the beep test, he parked his car there, put a CD into the cassette and actually turned it on, and it goes into different levels. So when it beeps, that's level 1. And it does that 10 times, then it goes to level 2, then level 3. But you start walking, then you get faster and faster and faster. By level 9, you're sprinting. Now, the world record is held by New Zealand, 14.2. So level 9, you're doing okay. We get to level 10. No one's out. We get to level 11. And how it is, you're running between a line and then a cone. Then you run back to the line, and then back to the cone. Level 12 we get to. Even Guy Kebble is still in. So Mac is now excited. We are doing extremely well. Throughout the 12s, the big fat oaks up front, they start bailing out. The fit oaks, the hookers and the flanks are still in. All the backs are still in. But we get to level 13, and Mac is getting so excited. Pre-season, he's excited. Near the end of level 13, there's 1 or 2 forwards in. Tash, it wasn't you. I think it was Fives. I think you were still in. And most of the backs was in. Even Dick Muir was in. We get to 14.1. Mac is still excited. He's now bubbling with excitement. 14.2, we equal the world record. 14.3, he shouts to Kevin, Kevin, stop the training. Stop. We are now the fittest team in the world. From now on to the next month, no more fitness. What he didn't know is that Dick Muir was on the corner. And every time Dick got to the cone, he nudged a little bit closer. You do that 60 times, you're saving yourself a good 10 meters. So, Mac, you're up there listening to us. I'm sorry. We weren't the fittest team in the world. Now I've lost you. I'm calling up now. Got it. Now, finally, the middle son. It's his turn now. So please could I ask Craig McIntosh to come to the stage.
Thank
you, John. And this is a gospel story that before Dad passed away, he shared with us that if the best MC that he's ever had, other than him, was John Allen. So, John, we just want to say thank you. On behalf of the family, it's a privilege to talk, and this is the only personal side that you'll hear. This is a celebration. And I just want to say thank you for giving us an opportunity as a family to share. There would be some parts of this that has been already shared in the church earlier, and please forgive if you're hearing it twice. That's why we got 2 ears. Dad called one woman his wife. Dad called us 3 men his sons. Dad called 2 ladies his daughter-in-laws. Dad called 2 ladies as granddaughters. Dad called 3 men as grandsons. And as we've heard, Dad called many, many thousands of us master. And if Dad really, really liked you, he would call you, you little prick. The outpouring of Dad's passing has been beyond our family expectations. The messages, emails, tributes, telephone calls, flowers, gifts, meals, prayers from absolutely everyone and everywhere has not only knocked us off our feet but also held us together in knowing just how much Dad meant to everyone. On thinking and reflecting about his life this past week, since he passed away 1 week ago, we've been blessed to spend a lot of time together, especially over Easter. And motivated by the overwhelming response of his passing, we reflected on what made Dad literally the master. We speak of success. He had success. But when we define success, that doesn't mean that we can actually become a master. There's something more than success that made Dad the master. It was about his significance. There were 4 things that distinguished Dad in him being significant. 4 things that was evident in his life that resulted in his significance. Firstly, Dad was personally, fiercely driven. Ross shared earlier how Dad lost his mom to cancer when he was young and when he was at boarding school between 14 and 15 years old. From that point on, Dad would reflect on that time. His family had become dysfunctional, and as a defining moment when everything that he needed to get done or achieve, that he would have to ensure he did it himself. Secondly, Dad fiercely loved his family. Starting with our mom, Dad so loved his family, his sons, his daughter-in-laws, their respective families, and most especially his grandchildren. He really, truly did. We told Mom this week that we loved Dad and we had 2 of you, and now we're going to love you doubly. You don't know what you mean to us, Ma, and we love you. Dad taught us one of life's lessons, and as we know from his book, love without discipline spoils, and discipline without love destroys. Dad taught us what family love is all about, and his love for his family was fiercely significant. You just test him by saying something negative about his family. Third, Dad fiercely loved his community, in which was mainly rugby, and to which he was always loyal to it. On reflecting on Dad's rugby career, he would say that his highlight was travelling to the yonder parts of South Africa during his rugby coaching tenure, and also with the SA Rugby Legends, and meeting the rugby community. He would often go on those trips and come back with his face glowing, not only from the amber he had consumed and the sore head, but just the conversations shared, the people met, and the experiences lived. Dad belonged to several other communities, being his golfing community at the Royal Golf Club, and as we've heard from Ross and Uncle Don, his beloved Zim community. Dad's always had 2 rules with community. Dad taught us always to show respect to others, no matter who they might be, until they give you a reason not to. Dad also taught us not to judge others. He said bitterness like jealousy and hatred can devour you. No one feels sorry for a bitter man, he pointed out. Dad fiercely loved his communities and was passionate, loyal, and supportive in everything that he participated in. Fourthly, Dad was fiercely with God. We spoke of the early years of our family life, that God was always part of our family. He wasn't he was part of our family. He was there, but he just wasn't given the center. Evan shared about Dad's years in Newport, and during that tenure, one particular Saturday rugby match that Newport lost in the most bizarre circumstances, putting them out of a final that they had a good chance of winning. Dad literally lost his faith and, in his words, denounced the Lord. Now, Dad has never read a book on rugby, and everything about the game and coaching came easily and naturally to him. And as he himself said, after that moment in Newport, he was paralyzed in terms of his coaching skills and talents. 2 days later, on the Monday afternoon before the practice session, Dad got down on his knees in the car park and confessed and repented to God. And at the moment he got up and began practice, everything returned back to him. It was at this point that Dad knew that everything that he had achieved during his rugby career was not so much about his doing, but rather the Lord's doing. From that moment on, Dad lived fiercely with God and ensuring that he lived out his faith by speaking about his faith wherever he could, helping the most vulnerable people however he could, and even making the trek to the Mighty Men Conference held by Angus. Dad had tasted success, but it was not until he truly believed and was fiercely with God that God in turn made Dad significant. It is absolutely unbelievable to understand that prior to 2001, 2002, Dad in his rugby coaching career had lifted many trophies and titles. Thereafter, his role changed as much as he was part of Rugby Legends. His tenure as a rugby selector involved with the Rugby Legends, he was positioned and aligned to people that he could meet and counsel and influence, and that's where his significance grew. I just want to say that on behalf of the family, to the people here, and mainly to the legends amongst us that we all hear now, we were blessed to call Dad our father, and we're blessed to have him as a family. You guys are legends that are all here, and just to see the past that has come to respect Dad means so much to us as a family, and it is here to celebrate him. We mourn him, and we are fiercely, fiercely missing him. But we know that without you, we would not be able to be standing where we are. So we want to say thank you to Dad for the life lessons learned, the wisdom shared and spoken, the people we have met, the memories we've made, and the love we have shared. Dad, you are more than just a dad to us. You are a voice of reason, our mentor, our role model, our confidant. You have taught us how to be solid and dependable, how to work hard and follow our dreams, and how to find joy and meaning in life. You have taught us about belonging, about loyalty, and ensuring above all that we maintain integrity in everything we do. You're always there for us. Nothing was insurmountable through the good times and the bad. And we just want to say to you, Dad, who would have thought that we would be on Kings Park sharing this moment that means so much to you, celebrating your life. We know you are in heaven, in a better place, but we also know that you'll always be with us in our hearts and our memories. Your legacy will live on through the many lives you touched and the countless ways you achieved significance. We will miss you, Dad, deeply, but we'll always be grateful for the times we had together and the love that was shared. Speaking to Evan and Ross after, we shall never watch another game of rugby in the same way, and we will miss you shouting at the referees. We want to say rest in peace, our dear Dad. Your spirit will live on forever. And as we share, you were not ours to keep, but God's to go back to. And we just want to say that we love you so, so much. Thank you again for your time, and we'll be up just now just to give thanks and acknowledgements. Thanks, John.
Thank you, Craig. Such lovely words. I think give the family one more huge round of applause. The next speaker is my blood brother, the president of SA Rugby Legends, Gavin Varegis.
Good evening, everyone. Rona, Evan, Craig, Ross, all the McIntosh legends, your other little brother, Terence, all the other legends, ladies and gentlemen. It was amazing today to see that in the church I saw Mac's middle name was Brian. Ian Brian McIntosh, IBM. I didn't even notice that they named this big tech company after him. It's amazing. And Mac really was. He was our international business machine. And it's really a huge honor just to be saying a few words as our master looks down on us. I'm sure he's up there having a tequila with Yost and James and Chester and Kitch and without a doubt Jonah Lomu and Shane Warren and Sid Nomus and everyone else who's passed before. Everyone loved the master, and if you didn't know him, the second you met him, you did love him. Mac, we want to thank you for what you have given us. Words are just too clumsy for me to quantify what it means to me. We all loved Mac as South African rugby legends. In fact, his longest coaching position was with us, nearly 23 years, from when Johnny Allen and I started South African rugby legends all that time ago in 2001. We had a win record of over 90%. Terence can tell us a bit better how many we did lose, because Mac wasn't really worried about how many we won because he expected that. But whenever we did lose a game, Mac would come to me and he took it so personally, whether he was coaching the Legends or the Sharks or the Springboks, and he'd say to me, Master, I think it's time I got to hang it up. You got to bring somebody younger in. And it was the same thing he always said to me whenever we lost, and I always had the same response, and I always said to him, Mac, you hang it up and you bring me your death certificate. And, well, Master Mac, you're always going to be our coach. Even though you're not here, you're always going to be with us. You brought us all together, kept everyone humbled and focused. You were the glue in everything that we stand for. Whether it was playing a Legends rugby game in South Africa, London, Buenos Aires, Italy or Portugal, or passing your vast skill and knowledge to the future legends, I'm sure, I have no doubt, that many of the younger generation of players playing provincially or at school learned those all-important basics, and also through VUCA and our Kawe programs from one of your clinics. I was talking to Howie Cleveland earlier, or yesterday in fact, and we were talking about one of our tours to Argentina where we played a game in Tandil. It's this like really rural area, and I think we got there late because the guys had a big night the night before, and we were supposed to kick off early, and we kicked off late, and it was kind of getting dark after the game. And Mac said, we're having a coaching clinic right now. So we started the coaching clinic, and the darkness came in, and it was tough because Mac didn't talk any Spanish, and there's only one guy who spoke a broken English, so Mac was interpreting through this guy and vice versa. And when darkness came in, Mac said, this is what I'm here for. He made all the locals park their cars in a big circle, and he brought all the kids and all the coaches and everyone in from the schools, and he had the coaching clinic in the middle of that field in the dark using the car headlights. When COVID changed the way we did things for a while, Mac found a way to make us even more relevant. The feeding schemes around the country and helping other charities from Inanda to Wentworth to Zululand, Free State, the Cape, Eastern Cape, Western Cape, right around the country. Feeding over 1 million people through the COVID period. And at 83 years old, Mac was standing in the queue with 10-ton trucks passing out the food to the underprivileged people. And you realize that we had to take our legends and make a difference. You always made sure that we were the very best at whatever we did. If this was the South African Rugby Legends Got Talent show, then Mac, you got the Lifetime Golden Buzzer Award, buddy. If I had to sum up in one word, Ian McIntosh, the word is limitless. There was nothing he couldn't do and nobody whose spirit he couldn't lift. When you were at your lowest, he pushed you to find your peak. And when you were at your highest, he kept you there. Mac, you embody the spirit and true meaning of the world legend. Nobody gave back more than you did. I don't really talk about Mac as a rugby coach, because to my mind, he never was going to teach Gary or Dickie or Juba or Joel or Fives or Jeremy or James Small or Lem or Johnny Allen to be bigger, better, faster, more fleet of foot. But he taught them how to be a team, how to be a family, how to work together, to always have each other's backs on and off the field. And that's why everyone who's part of Mac's golden team in the late 80s and through the 90s are still the best of friends 35 years later to this day. He brought out the best in those men, but sometimes they managed to sneak in a little trick here or there. I think there's anyone better than Dickie Muir at that. And I asked a couple of guys to share a story that not many people knew about Master Mac, which I've condensed just from a time perspective. And Dickie recalls how the night before the 1992 Currie Cup final against the Lions, Mac had the team psychologist come and chat to the guys and sent them to their rooms. I mean, I don't think any other team had psychologists at that time. And he sent the boys to their rooms, no room service, no interaction with family, just off to bed. Well, we all know Dick. He convinced his roommate Errol Stewart, who was a rookie in the team, I think it was Errol's second game, that they should order a beer to help them sleep. Errol wasn't so sure, but in the end, Dick ordered a castle and a line, and there was a knock on the door, and the waiter arrived with a bar towel over his arm. It was Ian McIntosh with a tray. And Errol turned to Dickie, and he said, "Dick, your drinks are here." And Mac looked at him and said, "Dick only drinks Castle," because there was a lion as well. What happened next? They all sat down, Mac had a whiskey, and they all enjoyed a drink together. Mac had a special way of dealing with individuals within a team context, and he judged Dick on how he performed on the field. Thank heavens Dick was a good player. Juba, the Rolls Royce. He recalled how Mac always called him Juba when he had a bad game and Master when he played well. Thankfully, he called him Master a lot. But in the one tour in New Zealand, Juba got dropped, and he was really upset, and him and Cabos van der Westhuizen were sitting there, and a parcel arrived from Rona. It was a hair shampoo for Mac, and the concierge asked Juba if he'd give it to Mac, and Juba bought some pink dye and poured it into Mac shampoo. And the next morning, they were sitting there and they were all panicking, because if Mac came out with pink hair and had to sit there in a test match, it wasn't going to work out all that well. But luckily, Mac had seen that the bottle had been tampered with, so he didn't use it. But, Juba said, "I've been fortunate to work with many coaches, local and international. I can say that Mac is the best coach I ever worked with. The All Blacks playing Mac's flat line of rugby is a testament to his great legendary rugby coaching skills. Master, thank you for all the years of coaching. You truly taught me a lot about the game, and I can't thank you enough for making me the player I turned out to be. I will never forget your wise words. Good things come to those who believe, better things come to those who are patient, and the best things come to those who don't give up. You are a true legend of the game, a great loss to South Africa and world rugby. Rest in peace, Master." Then there was James Small, not a diamond in the rough, but a rough diamond, but what a talent. And Max saw that and nurtured that. James, my friend, he saw beyond your faults and found a way to coax and coach the best out of you. John Smith, the CEO of South African Rugby Legends, said he was lucky to have Mac as his first senior coach at the age of 18. He's now in his mid-40s. He's nearly a bully. And Mac has remained a huge part of his life. More recently, working together at Rugby Legends, Smitty tells me that Mac was the first person to phone him when he got his Bok call-up. And again, when he was injured and out of the mix, he took Smitty out for a coffee and told him to never lose faith, to keep training, and he would get back to where he wanted to be. And what happened? He captained the Boks to a World Cup win, is the most capped Springbok captain in history, and third most captain in world history. I reckon everyone sitting here has a Mac story. Rona, thank you for giving up your precious time with Mac. so he could continue doing what he loves. So how do you say goodbye to the greatest mentor, coach, friend, leader, and father? There are many people with wonderful skills, but Mac, none will ever replace your set of skills, especially your emceeing skills. They were next level. Mac, you could call Rugby World Cup winners pricks 5 times in one sentence in such a way they were honored to have been called that. And the jokes. You could tell the same joke 20 times and everyone would still laugh every time you told it. I mean, you guys put your hands up how many times you've heard this one. Mac would say when he was emceeing functions or events, he'd say, because you were so old, when my wife says, let's go upstairs and make love, I said, pick one of the two, I can't do both. The master had a karma and energy that was so unique. It was, and I said in the beginning, limitless. Everybody dies, but not everybody lives. Mac, you lived it better than anybody. Mac, we know you'll be guiding us from heaven and making sure Terence and the boys select the right players for our next game. Portugal this year will be different, but we know you will be with us. Just like at home, we'll all do it for you. You always were and always will be around. I hope that your journey is peaceful and as happy as the millions of people you have trained, guided, fed, loved, and given a future. You carved the path for our future. If all of us here are master, you were the headmaster. Rest in peace, sir. Arrivederci. Until we meet again. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Gavin. There's one thing Mac could do. He could remember. You couldn't bullshit him about a game because he would know every single game and every single move. And he knew it on the tee. So you couldn't say, remember that game when I got 10 out of 10 lineouts? He knew exactly how many lineouts you got and what you did. His brain was as sharp as anything. And as much intense as he was and focused as he was, you could also have fun with Mac. So 93, before the first test against Australia, we were training on on top of a hill in our army barracks near Manly Beach. And for some reason, Joel and I were waiting to get on because different teams were having the team run. And it was captain's practice, so the captain was taking the run and Mac was on the side watching it with those intense eyes. But because we were near the beach, the seagulls were shooting down and making a noise and then diving to the pitch. So I said to Joel, let's tell Mac that the Aussies are so technically advanced that they put cameras on the seagulls. Now, captain's training is hardcore because you do all your moves. So we sidle up to Mac and we say, Mac, check those seagulls. Check how they're diving down. I said, I'm telling you, Mac, the Aussies are so far ahead. They've got cameras there. And they're videoing all our moves. And they're sending it back to base camp with the Aussies. So he says, no, stop messing me around. Get away. Anyway, for the next 5 minutes, he keeps looking at these. And about 10 minutes later, he shouts, Sergeant Major! So the Sergeant Major is looking after us, comes across. He says, go and get a rifle and shoot those seagulls down. Sorry, Mac, we were only playing. Okay, the next speakers are the captains, the Currie Cup winning captains. And they're going to come up, they're on the stage here, so they're going to come up in chronological order. That's a big word for a hooker, eh? Chronological order. Starting with 1990, Craig Jameson, followed by Val Bartman in 92, and then to end off, Gary Tashman, 95 and 96. Craig, please take the stage.
Thank you, John. I must just move this up a bit because I know you're so short. To the McIntosh family, Rona, the boys, and the rest of the family, thank you. It's a great privilege and honor on behalf of the 1990 team to have been invited here to pay tribute to Mac, Mackie, Tosh, Goat, and of course Master, the many names that Mac went by. It's by no means an easy task, obviously, to talk about a legend, because where does one begin? Wednesday, last week, the rugby world came crashing into mourning with the news of the passing of Mac. And since then, many tributes have poured in from players, not only on the rugby side, but from players in all walks of sport, from coaches, administrators, reporters, and from the general public. So loved and cherished was the man Ian McIntosh, and so widespread was his influence and following. Traits such as passion, loyalty, dedication, knowledge, friendliness, integrity, competitiveness, astuteness, drive, determination, and many, many more. Forwards, are you okay with those words? But to me, Mac had certain qualities that epitomized him. Number one was his endless humility and his respect for others, no matter who. And he never passed judgment on people. His dedication and loyalty to his team and players was utmost, and he was always listening to players and ready to back them no matter what. And last but not least, his uncanny ability to relate to anybody, except, of course, the poor referees, whom he had a constant love-hate relationship throughout his coaching career. I remember the one story, and believe you me, there are many stories about Mac and the referees. But it was on a Super 10 trip where I was the team manager post-playing, and we had played in New Zealand in a Super 10 match, and the ref of that day was none other than Peter Marshall, and he had a shocker. And when I say he had a shocker, we thought he had a shocker. You can imagine what Mac thought. Anyway, we were on a flight back from New Zealand. I think we were heading across to Australia, and the one and only Dickie Muir, of course, was up to his tricks again, and we walked into the business class lounge, and of course there was Peter Marshall sitting there but skulking away when he saw Mac. Of course, Dickie, with his bright eyes, managed to see the seat number that Peter Marshall was at, and he went straight to the desk and said, you've got to please change Ian McIntosh. And he put him next to Peter Marshall for the next 3 hours on the plane. Of course, when Mac got off, he said to us, you know what? He's actually not such a bad guy after all, but he's still a prick and a terrible ref, as only Mac could say. In 1986-87, Mac took over the Natal coaching role from then Koos Beerkus, and this was the beginning of the Mac era in Natal rugby, leading into the golden decade of Natal rugby in the 1990s with Val and Tash as captains. As we all know, and as the sporting records show, Mac was instrumental in changing Natal rugby, and he changed it from the Cinderella province of lovely-to-watch running rugby with few victories, unfortunately, to a new brand of direct rugby. This brand, which was so simple and logical in its application that it surprised the rugby-playing fraternity in the famous Currie Cup national championships and then delivered that outstanding victory in Natal's 100-year history in 1990 at Loftus Versfeld. This 1990 victory, I would argue, was possibly the biggest rugby upset in the country at the time and led to none other than our famous Springbok fly half, Nas Boerta, having to eat his words when after the Currie Cup victory at Loftus Versfeld in the post-cocktail speech, Nas said, never again in the next 100 years would Natal win the Currie Cup. Unfortunately, Nas and many other detractors underestimated Mac, his passion, and his will to succeed. Who will ever forget that first final when Natal came of age, the euphoria, the sign on the national highway as you entered the province of Natal saying, "Welcome to Currie Cup country," and the famous ticker tape parades through the streets of Durban and Pietermaritzburg, which unified the Natal public. I can even remember post the Sunday at Loftus Versfeld when we had woken up from celebrating and Mac came in and said, look, the Durban municipality wants to do a ticker tape parade through the streets of Durban and Maritzburg, and we all looked at each other and said, geez, do we have to, Mac? It's going to be a bit of a no-show type of thing. Anyway, we went ahead and there were 20 Mercedes parked out and everyone got on the top of Grey Street and we came around the corner into Smith Street, and I'm not joking, there must have been over 200,000 people in the streets, in the buildings, just looking and cheering. And it was a wonderful moment for this province and a wonderful moment for Natal rugby, and all because of that great coach and his ingenuity, Ian McIntosh. I think John Bishop, the astute and respected Natal Rugby reporter at the time, put it most aptly, and John is here with us this evening, John. It's good to have you here. When he said in 1990, in Natal's rugby centenary year, the frog became the princess. And I think that aptly describes Natal Rugby at that stage. The question which is always asked is, how did Mac bring about such a change to Natal Rugby, and what was his recipe for success? To me, it was simple, yet so ingenious. Firstly, he realized that any team needed to pit like against like when it came to brawn, not brains. In other words, forwards, not backs, for those who understand rugby. Mac realized that he needed a pack of forwards that could dominate any team, and so in the late 80s, he started building and brought in top players, the likes of Guy Kebbell, Rudy Versace, Val Bartman, Tom Lawton, the Australian, and John Plumtree, to name but a few, who were and all still remain, with the exception of the newly kilogram-diminished Tom Lawton, massive hunks of men. Added to this, Mac needed brains and talented backs, with speed, ball skills, to complement the bulk and power in his pack. And there he was blessed with the likes of Joel Stransky at number 10, a classic centre pairing of Jeremy Thompson and Dick Muir, one with sheer skill, speed and class, and then the other. We also had a classic winger speed pairing of Christy Noble and Tony Watson, scorer of that historic, never to be repeated 9-point try, and Hugh Edwards at the back, boom, boom, boot, and years of experience. And of course, somewhere in the mix was a well-mannered scrum half and captain, an epitome of a gentleman with socks down and long hair. So with forwards and backs of note, a skilled backline, and a brand new effective style of rugby, which, by the way, in my humble opinion, is no longer practiced in the game of rugby, where we have forwards just going back and standing, waiting to receive the balls, and the next person or the first person to do it and change the game will become the next McIntosh. But Mac was also innovative, not only his style of rugby, and I can remember in 1990 when we camped in the hotel for the week waiting for the final, he came to me and he said, I think I want to do something different. And I said, sure, Mac, but give us some indication. He said, I'm bringing in a sports psychologist, which was quite a shock in those days because most of the team didn't even know what a psychologist was, let alone how to spell it. And anyway, he got hold of Ken Jennings, and I can remember us going into a team meeting and Mac having Ken Jennings coming up and introducing. The next thing, all of us were lying down on the floor and dreaming, and Ken Jennings was saying this, and you can imagine the Kebbells, the Versachis, the Lawtons lying there on their back. Anyway, it seemed to have worked because at the end of the day we came through, and of course that became one of the key points for winning the Currie Cup in the years to come. Of course, Ian Mac was also a disciplinarian, and we've heard that many a time at the ceremony this afternoon and here. And he was very strict, but he was not draconian. I think that was the difference between Mac and the coaches of that era, where Natal was a different province and a draconian type coach was not going to go down well. He allowed players to participate, and I think that was also one of the key things that Mac did. You actually heard the story about the discipline, and one would never come to a practice late because if you did, you got chased away. And John told that wonderful story of his. There was also a classic case here. I remember when one of the youngsters from Maritzburg Varsity, and I forget who it was, came dashing down to practice, travelled all the way there through the traffic, got here. He was a minute late. Max said, come here. Who you? You're late. Get in your car and go back home. And of course the guy turned around and went back home. But believe you me, he was never late again for a practice, and nor was anyone else. Even though discipline was a factor and Mac was quite strict, he was full of humour and fun. There was a wonderful lighter side to Mac, and he could and often had to take the joke himself. There are endless classic stories and examples of this, and every team has a joker or instigator, the mischievous party, and in 1990 we had many of them. However, we were blessed with Dickie Muir, who was undoubtedly the supreme commander in that position. and continued that for many years. I remember Dickie Muir, and I mentioned about his trick with the referee. I remember often when we'd wake up on a Sunday after a game away and we'd have to go to the airport, and everyone had had a big night and everyone was feeling hungover. Dick would always get there early. As I said, he'd go to the air hostess in the front at the ticket office and say, please, could you just sort out the ticketing for us? And he'd always ensure that poor old Mac had a middle seat, and he was either between Lawton, Keble on each side, or Lawton, Versaghi on each side. And Mac carried on this, and eventually he called me aside, and he said, I think there's something wrong here, because every time I get on a plane, I'm either stuck between one of these two big Fords, and they've all got these terrible, smelly liquor breaths. And I said, no, Mac, never. It's just the luck of the draw. And such was Mac. Also, I can remember in that same Currie Cup when we're sitting in that hotel after bringing in the sports psychologist, Ken Jennings. Everyone was tense. It was getting the day before. Mac called us into the team room and said, right, are we going to go over the game plan and everything? And we were sitting in the front row. I forget who was with, but I was sitting there. I think Henry Coxwell was there. Anyway, somebody cracked a joke and everyone started giggling, and Mac just suddenly flew off. And he said, okay, so you guys think you know better. And everyone started giggling, and Henry Coxwell was sitting there chuckling. He said, right, Coxwell, or Faceman as he called him, you take over. And of course he's expecting Henry Coxwell to shy away and say, no, I'm sorry, Mac. And Henry got up and said, okay, Mac. And he walked to the front and he got to the board and he carried on and started saying this, that, and the next thing. Of course, poor old Mac had to eat humble pie. And Coxwell was told that he could be the next coach of Natal. There was also that classic story with our poor friend Tom Lawton, who came over from Australia, and he didn't know much about biltong. And sometimes when we went across to play in a province, the obvious trick was to pack each room with a kilogram of biltong for each player. And Mac got it in his head that we weren't allowed to eat the biltong because it dehydrated you. You can't eat it before the Friday because on the Saturday you'd be dehydrated and you wouldn't be able to play. Of course, he gave us the warnings, nobody's to eat the biltong. Keble and Lawton shared a room. Keble said, come on, Tom, you knew, don't be silly, eat it. Of course, Tom devoured the whole kilogram of biltong. And when we went down to the team meeting, Keble walked across to Mac and said, hey, Mac, Tom's been eating the biltong. Of course, Mac went off his rocker. He called Tom to the front in the middle of the meeting. He said, come here, master. And he said, open your mouth. So Tom Lawton opened his mouth and Mac examined. He said, it's blue. You've been eating the biltong. You're not going to play tomorrow. And of course, Tom didn't even know. He went to the mirror and he started looking. No blue, of course. But such was the nature of Mac. He was always humorous and he was always part of the fun. But there was always a line, like anywhere, where we knew as players you couldn't cross, and we never did. And I think that was why we were a successful team, because we had the camaraderie, we had the spirit, we respected Mac, Mac respected us, and we had fantastic team spirit. Sorry, I've gone. As I said, we built up that wonderful team spirit. It continued through the years, and it remains as strong today as it was 32 years ago. One of the traits in the 1990 team was every 10 years to have a reunion. And fortunately, in September, we had our 30-year reunion, although it was the 32nd because of COVID. And we got everybody together, and all the players came from around the globe. We had a week of game viewing. We went on houseboats at Shire. We had dinners, and we came and watched the test match here. And little did we know at the time the state of Mac's health. And fortunately, Mac kept it quiet. I know he was aware of where it was. It wasn't too serious at that stage, but he kept it quiet. And I think that's typically Mac. He was a very private person. And in retrospect, it most probably was the best thing, because we shared such a wonderful time together as a team. We shared such wonderful memories. And had he come out and spoken about it, it would have changed that whole atmosphere. But that was Mac, always caring, always covering the players, and never thinking about himself. So how good a coach was Mac? Well, it took Natal 100 years to win the Currie Cup, and Ian Mac only 4. For me, that puts Mac's ability as a coach in true perspective. But added to this, it took Mac only 6 more years to win 3 additional Currie Cups. a truly momentous achievement in any coach's book. Mackie was a man who lived our wonderful game of rugby 24/7 for 40 years, and we were privileged as a province to have him as the face of Natal Sharks rugby for 15 years, where he coached Natal in over 300 games and bridged the gap between amateur and professional rugby with great ease and aplomb. Under Mac's guidance, technical expertise, and meticulous planning, Natal won 70% of their games in that decade. And as Rod McQueen, the Australian coach, who became a close and good mate of Mac and shared Mac's vision in rugby and passion, said Mac was a driven soul, a master technician, and an astute coach. To the McIntosh family, Rona, Ross, Craig, Evan, the respective wives, the kids, firstly, congratulations on your showing today. You were fantastic, said from the heart, and Mac's privileged to have a family like you. I know the feeling and pain and loss of your beloved Mackie, husband, father, grandfather, and we owe great debt of gratitude since they selfishly shared him with us on a daily basis as a coach and mentor for so many years. In fact, I would guess that the decision of the TMO is still pending as to whether Mac spent more time with his blood family or his rugby family. A special word of thanks to you, Rona, for putting up with him, and also for that wonderful times that you shared with us where Rona used to make us special dinners. She catered for us as a team, and she used to make us special dinners if we won a match. So we always used to go out and say, well, if we win this one, we've got a Rona dish on the Friday before. So, Rones, you were wonderful, and we truly loved your support for us. I'm also told via the red phone that Mac arrived at the pearly gates soon after his departure from the green hills of Natal, only to be met by God himself. God explained to Mac that he'd been keeping a watchful eye on Mac's progress in rugby during his stay on earth and was mightily impressed with his knowledge of the game. So much so that a vacancy had just come up and he was appointing Mac as chairman of the Celestial Rugby Referees Committee with immediate effect. The world of rugby has lost a truly remarkable rugby man who will always be remembered across the globe with great fondness and love. Go well, Mac. We miss you already, but you will remain in our hearts forever. We salute you, Mac. Cheers from your 1990 team.
Good evening, everybody, friends and family. Today we gather to honor and remember Mac. Just want to say that, nothing has changed much. The backs still talk a lot and we do all the work. So, guys that played with me would know that, and Gary probably, I assume, we don't have pages and pages to go through, but thank you for your time, and to the family, our condolences. I think me and Mac had one thing in common, and both of us have been dropped by Louis late. And I think mine turned out to be better because I came to the Sharks. I was down and out, and they introduced me to Mac. And that's where my rugby career started. He supported me, coached me, and I played the best rugby of my career. It is difficult to express in words what Mac meant to me and to us as a team, as a coach, mentor, and friend. Mac was an exceptional coach, and every player respected him. He had a unique ability to bring out the best in every player, as he did with me, motivating the team to believe in themselves and always to go the extra mile. Mac's approach to the game was totally different. He believed that you had to enjoy the game and created an environment on and off the field that everybody enjoyed it. That is what made Mac such a great coach. He saw the potential in each and every player and pushed them to the very best. With Mac, the impossible became possible. Winning the Currie Cup in 1990 against the mighty Bulls. Who will ever forget that? Mac gave me a second chance, and to many other players in my career. That included winning the Currie Cup in 1990 and again playing against Transvaal and winning the Currie Cup in 1992. The first match we played used to be called the Yardley Gold Cup. We played at Ellis Park. I wanted to prove a point. I was trying to be as fit as possible. Close to 100 games for the Lions, and we lost with about 30 points. I think those days the try was 3 points still, or something close to that. And it was a big hiding. And Mac came to me in the change room and he said, "You know what? We're going to win the Currie Cup." And I thought to myself, I'm positive, but I'm not that positive. And I think that if you recall, and all the players that were there, as we go game by game, day by day, Mac took the team. And, you know, they spoke about Rona making the meals. And I think if we won, we got a special meal. So we almost every week got a special meal from her. Thank you. As we mourn his passing, we can also look back at all the great achievements and time we spent with him. Mac's wisdom, his knowledge of the game, and how he treated us were amazing. He will be greatly missed, but his legacy will live on through the countless lives that he touched. To Mac's family and friends, please accept my deepest condolences. I know this is a difficult time. I've lost my own father a few months ago. I hope that in this time of sorrow, we can find comfort in knowing that Mac lived a life full of purpose and made a significant impact on so many lives. May his memory be a blessing. Thank you, and God bless you all.
Good evening to Rona and the family. Thanks very much for giving us this opportunity to talk here. I first came into contact with Mac in 1984, where we were preparing for the Craven Week tournament. Our coach at the time had asked Mac to come and take a few sessions. Our team had the likes of Sean Gage, Joel Stransky, and Steve Atherton. And by the way, I just want to clear it now. It was only a rumor that Steve drove his own car to practice. Little did we know how influential Mac would be in the future of our rugby playing careers. The one thing that I can clearly remember that stood out when he took us then was the energy and the excitement that he brought to those sessions. And this has never changed throughout his coaching career. No matter what level of team he coaches, no matter what level of player is in the coaching setup, that energy and excitement never faded. As I think Johnny mentioned the stats, I'm sure no other coach has converted players who were contemplating on playing other sports turn to rugby. 95 season was a good year for South African rugby, winning the first World Cup since isolation. It was also the year that it turned professional. These would have been challenging times for any coach. You had a lot of uncertainty amongst the players. We weren't sure which direction to take. There were some players that had secured contracts and others not. There were some very interesting moments in the change room that season. To Mac's credit, and without a whole bunch of support staff, he was able to guide us through these tricky times and not let it affect our performances. He was a coach that thought out of the box, and that year he managed to attract two top French players, Olivier and Terry. And I think if you ask him to this day, it was one of their best experiences, winning the Currie Cup and playing in an environment that Mac had created. 95 was also a big turning point in my career. My experience in captaining a side was limited to one single game for under 14 cricket team. I clearly remember we were warming up here, kicking the ball around before Monday's practice. He called me to come and talk to him. As most of you will know, that when you're singled out on a Monday after a game, more often than not, the coaches are going to tell you that you've been dropped. I ignored his call and carried on kicking, as I presumed he was going to make Mark Andrews the number 8, as he had done so well in the World Cup 95. Eventually, I could see those eyes were starting to get the same as when the ref makes a dodgy decision, and decided it would be better to go over to him. I got over to him, and he said, the selectors had given it a lot of thought, and how would you like to captain the side? To this day, I can't remember my response. I was so shocked. Personally, this is where Mac played a huge role in my life. Firstly, he saw something in me that other coaches hadn't, and he believed I could do the job. At the same time, he gave me all the support and the advice that was much needed. He encouraged me to trust my own leadership style and not change my approach to the game or to the other players. What I did learn from Mac, no matter how tough the decision or how far he had come with the player, he was always honest with the player. There was no hiding behind, I'm just resting you for this game, or I feel this combination is better. He was honest, and the way that he put it across, you knew where you stood and you knew what you had to do. His loyalty towards players was unquestionable, and I experienced this in 1999. Mac knew his players very well, but on this one occasion, not so well. It must have been around this time, Easter, and we had been given the Monday off so we could take a long weekend, and we were training that evening. Henry Honeyball had committed to being at the start of a Bergville marathon as a celebrity that morning. I'm not sure why he had agreed to, because he doesn't normally do those things. Anyway, he started talking to this elderly guy at the start of the race and was supposed to pull out. And typical Henry, he couldn't pull out and ended up running the whole race. He then got in his car and drove 3 hours to practice. Reese and Mac were sitting on the side talking and saw Henry battling to walk towards them. Reese said to Mac, "We got a problem. He's pulled both his hamstrings." Mac said, "No way, he always walks like that." What had happened, by the time Henry got to Kings Park, his muscles had cramped up so severely he could hardly walk. Mac, I would like to thank you for taking a big risk and giving me the opportunity of captaining a side. 96 was a year that really, really stood out. I think we were playing the brand of rugby that Mac had preached for the last number of years. At times in his career, he had been criticized for playing only a bashing game and not getting the ball out wide to the wings. We won't forget two of his sayings. You have to earn the right to go wide, and secondly, you don't see an opening test batsman hit the first ball for 6. He builds the innings. At the beginning of the season, he got all the players into the team room and asked the backs to formulate their game plan on the board. The backs always went first, as he had concern they might copy some of the forwards' ideas. Of course, they wanted to run everything wide as soon as possible. He then asked the forwards for their game plan, and we wanted to scrum, maul, and keep it close. He got up and said, "Right, we'll do the combination of the two, and this is how we'll do it." As you can see, in those days, the game plans were rather simple and not technical. But I think what was more important was he had got everyone to feel that they had a say in how they wanted to play the game, and at the end of the day, it showed in the results. We ended up in the finals of the Super 12 that year. We lost to the Reds in Durban the week before the semis, so we had to travel and play the Reds in Brisbane that next week. Mac's approach to playing away from home was always very positive, but I suppose his whole approach to life in general was positive. We would get there to do a job, and as well as experience the local city and what the local city had to offer. Some of the players took the second part a bit too seriously. I think we've heard his name a couple of times. We ended up beating the Reds 43-25, unfortunately couldn't get across the line at the last hurdle and lost to a very strong Auckland Blues team. Currie Cup went the same way, except we won in the final. We ended up winning all 15 games that year, not losing one, scoring a record number of tries for the Currie Cup season, and the late James Small scoring a record number of tries individually. So what about the bashing game? From the time I started with Mac in 91 to the time we finished in 99, the one theme that Mac constantly pushed was we were a family and we were to play for one another. All other influences are immaterial. If we don't get this right, we won't be successful. As players, we need to thank Rona, not only for the meals she made us, but also for sharing her husband with us. And then to the boys, Ross and Craig and Evan, who shared a father with the whole rugby community. Rest in peace, Mac. We will miss you.
Thanks, Craig, Vol, and Gary. When I phoned all three captains yesterday just so they could be in sync, and I told them they got 5 minutes each. Vol says, John, I'm not going to talk for 5 minutes. I'll talk for 2 minutes. But don't worry, I know Craig will take up my spot. Anyway, guys, we're going to watch videos now, so I'd like to ask the gentlemen if you want to go back to your seats so you can see the videos, because you can't see them from here. And while you're making your way, Craig, you mentioned Tommy Lawton. That reminds me of a story. Mac was very sharp, and he was very witty. So we used to do have panel discussions, and I was the MC at the time, and I was taking the mickey out of Mac. And I said, and so Mac said to me, John, do you remember that time I called you into my office? So I said, Mac, you've called me a few times into your office. He says, remember that time when Tommy Lawton arrived from Australia? I called you in. I said, yes, Mac, I do remember. What did I say to you? I said, I can't remember, Mac. He said, remember I told you that Tommy Lawton, Australian international, is coming here to Natal. He's a big lad, big and strong. You need to get into the gym and you need to start eating. I said, yes, Mac, I remember that. He said, John, you know what my biggest regret in life is? I said, no, Mac, what's that? I forgot to tell you to stop eating. Please cast your eyes on the screens. There's some messages from some players, and I've got some messages that I'll read after that.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On the 24th of September 1938, in Bulawayo, Zimbabwe, a special boy was born into this world. 84 years later, we have a lot to celebrate and a lot to say thank you for. There are 3 things that I would like to say thank you for. Thank you, Coach, for bestowing the Springbok captaincy on me at Kings Park against the French in 1993. It has changed my life. Thank you, Mr. McIntosh, for touching so many people deeply with your energy, your knowledge, and your wicked sense of humor. Thank you, Master, for giving unconditionally to the sport of rugby, the sport that we are all so passionate about. May you rest in peace, sir.
Last week I heard of the passing of Ian McIntosh. Obviously a very sad day for everybody involved in rugby, and obviously for his family. All I can say is I had the privilege of working with him. Mac was a selector with the Springboks during the time I was there. But I think the one thing Mac always did for me was he gave me hope, because as a young English-speaking, non-provincial player, I always had dreams of coaching at the highest level, and I think Mac was probably the one guy who inspired me, because Mac was an international player, he was a schoolmaster, English-speaking, wasn't a Springbok, and then ended up coaching the Springboks. So I think without him knowing it, he was such an inspiration for me, and we'll miss him. I think the whole world rugby will miss him. Anyone that's ever had anything to do with him will miss him. And obviously to his family, Rona, and the kids, obviously I know Craig as well, so to Craig and to his family as well, and I'm sure to anyone who knew Mac, we hope he rests in peace. As he would say, rest in peace, Master.
Yeah, guys, this one's from Mac. A couple of us managed to talk on a video call. It doesn't take many, guys, but this is for everybody, boys. What a man, what a legend, and to Mackie. Love you, Mac. Cheers.
Hi, Rona family. I just want to share my heartfelt condolences to you all on behalf of Lara and I and the boys. Sorry we couldn't be out there for the day, but I'll reflect on the couple of hours I had with Mac a couple of weeks ago with Johnny Allen. It was a pretty special time for me. Mac, I just want to thank you for the influence you had on me as a player, but as a coach, and just being able to be more than just a coach, but a father figure as well. Winning trophies was just part of the fun with you and the rest of the team, but creating a culture that has created relationships for the rest of our lives is really what it's all about. When I walk through the Ian McIntosh's gates now, it'll hold special memories for me, and also drive me to be a better person, and work hard as I can every day. Thank you very much, Mac. Love you.
Factor of the 90s.
Yeah, he's a mentor. He's a mentor, Ian McIntosh. Everybody has a big respect of Ian McIntosh. He's the master of the Sharks. He built this team, and he was a good coach, very hard. No, with me he was like a father. When I arrived here, I didn't speak so much English. I didn't know the players except maybe the international player like Mark Andrews or Andre Joubert or James Small. And he introduced me to the Shark team, and it was very important, like a father, you know, to his son. So I've got a big respect for him. And when we see his career, how many titles he had, maybe 4 or 5 Currie Cup and a Super Rugby final, so I respect him.
Old MacDonald had a farm, E-I-E-I-ho. Yeah, I actually can't believe that this is Rob Lowe phoning from actually up at Stillway at my holiday house, where Ian came up with the legends, and we spent a few hours. I was just looking at his seat he sat on, and we spent a few hours together that night at a charity auction, and spent hours laughing and just reminiscing about the tours we've been on, the Argentinian tour, the many tours, and reminiscing about the times that I used to phone him about the Springbok loose forward trio, and we used to deliberate about the Springbok loose forward trio. Yeah, Mac, the worst thing for me is to delete one's name off my phone. And I don't think I'll ever delete yours. There's a few friends which you don't delete. And I just want to say to the family and everybody, I think we must celebrate, because he was such a special man. We must celebrate his life. He was an amazing man. And I think Mac would like us all to celebrate it, because he was a special person that really has put his mark down in the sand of South Africa. And yeah, Mac, we'll love you forever, and all the best. We'll join you soon up in heaven. Hopefully not too soon. Love you, buddy.
I'm devastated about the news of Mac's passing. It's never great to get news like that, but particularly difficult for a man like him. He was a great part of our lives. He was an enormous part of our success. He gave everything he had, and I believe we gave him everything we had. The camaraderie, the love, the respect, the memories, the fellowship that we all had. It was absolutely remarkable. And it is to this day. And even with his passing, it makes it even more galvanising that we all stay together and catch up as often as we can. Rest in peace, Mac.
This is not a jersey, it's a tradition, worn on many historic occasions by great legendary players. It's your turn to add to it.
Some messages. Brian Habana, former Springbok. Mr. Ian Mack was a truly remarkable man, mentor, coach, husband, father, and human being. His passion and dedication to the game of rugby were beyond measure. His love for life and humour made a positive impact on all those who got the privilege to meet him. Rest in peace, Master. John Smith, former Bok captain and CEO of SA Rugby Legends. Mr. Mack was such an inspiration to all those who worked underneath him. It is one thing to be a good coach, but it's another to remain friends and a father figure to those he coached through the years. He will be missed and never forgotten. He did so much, not just for rugby in this country. A lot of us had the privilege of learning from him and being in his presence. Rest in peace, Mr. Mack. Peter de Villiers, former Bok coach. The saddest news to wake up to this morning with the passing of Ian McIntosh, a legendary coach for the Springboks and Sharks rugby, who was part of and will continue to be part of the rugby fabric in this country. You'll be sadly missed, Mac. Rugby became poorer this morning. It was with great sadness that I learned of Ian's passing. He was a passionate, dedicated, principled, and totally honest rugby man. I had the utmost respect for him and will miss his warm and intense rugby discussions whenever we met. My condolences and good wishes to Rona and all the family. Morne du Plessis. Mark Alexander, SA Rugby President. Mac was an intensely passionate rugby man, someone who never stopped learning, coaching, educating, and giving back. He will be remembered as the Springboks and Sharks coach who plotted the unthinkable in 1990 when the Banana Boys beat the Mighty Bulls in the Currie Cup final in Pretoria. Later in his life, along with South African Rugby Legends Association, Mac did magnificent work in uplifting the less fortunate, using rugby as a tool to bring smiles to the faces of thousands of children through the years. Mac never stopped working and believed in giving back to the game that he loved so much. South African rugby owes him so much gratitude for what he's done. We honour him for the role he played in the game, both here and internationally. Rest in peace, Master. Mark also wrote a letter, and it ended in a quote which is quite apt. The quote said, "A wise man once said, a great coach is hard to find, but impossible to forget." I think he must have met Mac. Nick Mallett's Super Sport Analysis and former Bok coach, who made a big mistake in 1999. Mac was the coach that I respected the most when I returned to South Africa from France in 2003. He was an innovative and forward-thinking coach, as well as an inspirational motivator. I loved our chats about rugby, and we shared many speaking engagements together over these past 12 years. Always knowledgeable, always passionate, and often irrelevant. Irreverent. It's irreverent, I think, because irrelevant would be wrong, not so. Sorry, Nick, irreverent. Must be your schoolboy education. Mac became a good friend. I and all those whose lives he touched will sorely miss him. Sean Everett and family. And it was a message to Craig. I know you would have been inundated with messages, so chose to wait a while. But your dad and family have been in my thoughts since the day he passed on. What a proud and loving son you must be of such a legend, not only as a coach, but an example to any human being of what a father figure should look like. I loved your dad and will miss his input and guidance. His support and influence on my career is unmeasurable. He guided me through my first coaching course in 1988 and has supported me since, through thick and thin. Deepest sympathies to you and your whole family. I will miss our chats. Prayers are with you in these difficult times. From Peter Muller. Mac, thank you for the impact you made on so many players, including myself, not only on the field but off the field. You're leaving a lasting legacy and awesome memories behind. All our love to Rona and the family. Brendan Dawson, current coach of Zimbabwe. To Mrs. Mac, Ross, Craig, Evan, and the whole of the McIntosh family, my sincere condolences go out to you all today as you celebrate the life of Mr. Mac. I'd like to take this opportunity to say thank you to him, as he was my true inspiration in becoming a coach after my playing career, and try follow in his mere shadow of what it meant to be a coach. His passion, belief, determination, understanding, and the immense knowledge of the game, but most of all, the love and dedication he showed to his players, which is a true indication of his amazing success as a coach. I truly believe that is what sets him aside from others as being the legend of the game of rugby, a true master. From all of us in Zimbabwe, we thank you all for the memories, as they will live onwards and never forgotten. God bless Mr. Mac. Regards. Rod McQueen from Australia, former Wallabies coach. I was so sorry to hear of Mac's recent passing. He was a great man and became a very close friend of mine. I had some amazing times with Mac, coaching against him as Brumbies v Natal and spending quality times whitewater rafting down the Zambezi River or tiger fishing on Chetty George, joined by Rona and Liz. I really enjoyed my many rugby discussions over the years, in particular when we spent time with coaches from around the world, working on the ELV's, experimental law variations for the International Rugby Board in Stellenbosch. Mac was always open-minded and willing to try new ideas and concepts for the betterment of the game. His insight, understanding, and passion of the game was second to none. Mac was universally respected by his peers and devoted to his core values and family. His contribution to South Africa and world rugby will be sorely missed. However, his legacy will be there forever. God bless you, old mate, Rod McQueen. From Brett Copens, CEO of Cell C, on behalf of Cell C, we would like to extend our heartfelt condolences to the family and friends of the legend Ian McIntosh. Ian was an inspirational coach and mentor who led not just the Sharks, but the Boks to victory with sheer passion and love for the game and his country. His legacy will live on in the game and in our hearts. Rest in peace, Mac. This message is from the members of the Royal Durban Golf Club, so it's a collective message. We all know of Ian's love for the game of rugby, but this just surpasses his love of golf, which came a close second. We, the members of Royal Durban Golf Club, or Royal it is more affectionately known, we're fortunate that Ian chose Royal as his home club. Ian was a member of Royal for more than 23 years, having joined the club in January 2000. He played regularly on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Saturdays at Royal Durban. All of us, therefore, had the honor of getting to know him personally on the golf course and in the 19th hole. As you know, he called everyone master, but many of us were fortunate enough that we got to know him so well that he changed our names from master to what that is recorded on our birth certificates. Often in golf, it is evident that you cannot win a match, and most of us give up, but not Ian. As in life, he never admitted defeat and would counter any negative statement with a positive one, even though it may not have been possible to achieve. There are so many stories to relate about the experiences Royal members had in the years of their association with Mr. Mac. Mac's humor is legendary, and you may recall Mac appearing in an advert for an old-age home sitting on a Harley-Davidson. Ian was in his early 60s and certainly not a candidate to live in such an environment, but to his great amusement, at one prize giving at Royal, he was fined for apparently accepting a room at the old-age home instead of accepting payment for appearing in the ad. There is a sluice that runs through the middle of Royal with quite a steep bank next to it. One Saturday morning, a golfer who wants to remain anonymous, playing in Mac's 4-ball, left his golf pool cart on the slope near the sluice. As he was about to play his next shot, Mac yelled out, "Hey, master, your cart is rolling into the sluice." Mac continued and said, "Dive in, you're a better swimmer than a golfer." The player managed to rescue his clubs but got sopping wet in the process. Mac said, "Just keep walking, master, you will dry out." Mac loved to tell that story, much to the disgust of our friend and the amusement of all. As in life, Mac also gave in golf, except if there was a 6-inch putt to win or half a hole. Mac always cared more for everyone else rather than himself, and this was especially evident in what he did for the caddies at Royal. Many years ago, Mac started the annual Royal Durban Caddies Day, which many of you may have participated in or generously donated to. This was Mac's passion, and over the years, through the effort that he put into organizing this event, he raised large amounts of money to improve the lives of the caddies, especially over the Christmas period. Mac's passion and dedication to the caddies is further demonstrated by the fact that in one of his last weeks of life, even though he was not in good health, he went to Royal unaided to tell the caddies of his demise and greet them for one final time. This golf day is an event that Royal Durban Golf Club will continue to organize for the caddies in memory of Ian. Mac, you're a legend that touched the lives of the members and caddies of Royal in a manner that will never be forgotten. And we are honored that you are part of our lives. Rest in peace, our dear friend. To enter the Royal Durban Golf Club, you must pass through a memorial arch that was erected in remembrance of Royal members who succumbed in 2 world wars. On it is the inscription, "Here too came once those others." Mac, when we as members pass through this arch, we will fondly remember that here too came once Master Ian McIntosh, members of Royal Durban. And last little message, I've asked Bros to actually, it's his message, but I've asked him to recite it in person. It's a lovely message.
In January this year, I was chatting to Craig, and I realized that Mac's time was drawing near. And I just thought, a lot of people make a big deal about people after they've passed, and they honor them, and it's rightly so, honor them afterwards. And I had it on my heart while I sat there this evening, back in January, to send Mac a message so that he could hear it before he passed. And yeah, I'm going to try to read it. So this is the second time I read this. Mac, I just spoke to Craig. We're getting load shed here. The house is quiet. The TV is off. Nix is out teaching, and there's not much light. It got me thinking, what is light? You were the light, Mac, for many. You shed light on all that you led and coached. You made an impact in countless people's lives, and for that I feel honored to have been coached by you and to have both you and Rona at our firstborn's christening to my father's funeral 2 years ago. A colossal in South African rugby. A sense of humour, knowledge of the game, student of the game, charismatic, humble, steadfast and consistent. Personal ambition was never a focus. Instead, it was always about the team. Husband to Rona, father to 3 fine, God-fearing sons, Evan, Ross and Craig, some of my very best friends. Your influence and friendship with my in-laws, the Kennedys, who you even knew my wife before I had met her, always telling me that I was batting out of my league, which I totally agreed with. Rugby man through and through. From Bulawayo to Durban, rugby runs through your very being. You coached Rhodesia, you coached the Natal Sharks, you coached the Boks. Even though you were a Shark, you selected Francois Pienaar, a Lion, as your Bok captain. The South African rugby legends and how you have driven this organisation since the early 2000s with John Allen and remain a crucial, vital driver of the legends. Mac, you always said, You don't have to be a Springbok to be an SA rugby legend. Every one of you standing in the circle has played some sort of level of rugby. But the fact that you are here and have put this jersey on and are prepared to give back to this beautiful game makes you a legend. A legacy that you helped shaped. This organization, because of your efforts, will continue to impact on people of our nation. Well done, Mac, or good job, Master, as you would say. Whilst playing under you, these are some of my memories and lessons learned from you. I can still see you on the training pitch, cap on head, long shorts, whistle in hand, and legs shaped so that a small pig could run right at you and through you without touching you. You knew how important it was to hold the dressing room. You could read the room. I remember you, and it was mentioned earlier tonight, I remember you not blinking for 1 second when you told James Small, post winning the Rugby World Cup in 1995, to leave practice after he arrived a couple seconds late. Lessons learned for all the youngsters who happened to be in that squad at that moment. Soon they learned that any new guy at training who knocked on the ball would get the call of, "Is this your first training session? Do that again, it'll be your last." Direct rugby, 15 verse 7 philosophy. So valuable even today, but not always implemented correctly. For you, it was never about just tucking the ball up and bashing it up into the line. Rather, get the ball on the advantage line whilst in movement and on angle, with the goal of creating broken play, getting behind the opposition tackle line, and thus creating a situation of 15 players moving forward with only the backs or 7 odd players to defend. Mac, you were brutal on us if we took that ball flat-footed, not moving, and receiving it behind the advantage line. Again, valuable lessons. Principles that I still believe in today. Early morning sessions at North Beach, speedos and all. And sorry for you if you were jumping off the North Beach piers and you had just moved down from Pretoria. You either sank or swam. Mac, just some of the players, and forgive me if I've missed 1 or 2 names here, but just some of the players' names during the time you coached at the Sharks. Teichmann, Bartman, Jameson, Mark Andrews, Vleis Versace, Lewitt, Reese Edwards, Dick Muir, Jeremy Thompson, Tony Watson, Federico Mendes, Wayne Farvey, Henry Coxwell, Tom Lawton, Gerard Harding, Joel, Kebbel, Atherton, Andre Joubert, Peter Miller, Ollie LaRue, Camel Blakeway, Robert Dupree, John Allen, James Small, John Slugger Slade, Cabos van der Westhuizen, Henry Honeyball, Neil Penrose, Adrian Garvey, Kevin Putt, Olivier Rumar, Terry Lacroix, Robbie Kempson, John Plumtree, Stefan Tablanche. You were animated on the sideline. You were a coach who could certainly get worked up. Passion flows through those veins, Mac. That passion and that drive is contagious. You influenced the rugby careers and lives of decades of players. You are held in the utmost respect. You are a true rugby legend of a man. Master, you are the ultimate master. I consider myself very fortunate to have been coached by you. Mac, we are praying for you tonight, you and your family. Bros.
Thanks, Bros. We're coming to conclusion now, so I'd just like to call up Craig to do some thank yous, and then I'll conclude at the end.
Thank you, John. Thank you again to the speakers before. And it just makes us incredibly proud of how immense Daz was. So thank you. A couple of thank yous. Please forgive me if I do leave anyone out that's not on here. There's just too many to mention and too numerous. But we have to start off firstly with Rod Gould. Thank you, Rod Gould, for making the phone call to Dad back in 1983 to offer him a position down here at the Natal Rugby Union, which changed our lives. We give all credit to you for changing the season that saw us come down to South Africa. Gavin Farigis, thank you for your continued support, your love and support, and helping Dad become the true master and achieving significance. As I said in the church, he loved you and respected you. Terence, for being another McIntosh son, you truly are. He loved you as well, and we're still going to love you. SA Rugby legends, thank you for helping Dad live his passion. Howard and Debbie Cleland, thank you for capturing all the memories for Dad. Mark Watson, thank you for teaching Dad the good life and for everything you did to honor him. Ed Kutsia, thank you for continuing the legacy at the Sharks and for what you have done for him. Navashni and the Sharks team, thank you for your incredible effort in helping Dad be remembered and honored here. I think on behalf of the family, it's absolutely beyond our wildest dreams in terms of what you've managed to assist in putting together. John Allen, Craig Jammer, Val Bartman, Gary Tosh, and Warren Bros, your contribution today, thank you so much. And thank you also for trusting Dad with everything that you achieved all together. Don Hatton, thank you for being Dad's best friend. That will never ever stop. Kevin Robinson, thank you for the continued ministry you gave Dad and Mom and for attending to a spiritual send-off for him today at St. Martin's. We want to thank the entire St. Martin's team and Vicky in particular for what you've done for Dad and Mom when we had our private family funeral at Dad's and Mom's spiritual home. Tony Watson, we share again. Thank you for your connection with Dad and Mom, and especially in the last few months. And as we've mentioned, thank you for also scoring that try in 1990. We make mention of Angus Buchan. Thank you for being the true example of God's disciple and for continuing to sow God's light into Dad and our lives. We're also conscious of the many people that traveled to be with us afar, and we just want to acknowledge that, to which Dad said he would have been incredibly impressed. I'll finish off with just saying that the game of rugby is the most unique sport, for it is the only sport that anyone of any size and frame can play and has a position for. It's a totally inclusive game that creates life memories, life relationships, and life connections. To this, Dad, we give you thanks for allowing us to play the game of rugby and to be connected. We love you. Thank you.
Thanks, Craig. To end off, I'm a hooker who likes poetry. As the players that I played with will attest to. Fortunately, it's not my normal poems. I decided, I spoke to a friend in the UK, a guy, John Armstrong, who's actually a professional poet. And I told him, could he dedicate a poem in memory of Ian McIntosh? And the poem is called Thread of Gold by John Armstrong. We are all but a stitch in a square-mile quilt that God has sewn together. An indivisible bond with a weave so close, our mortal parting cannot sever. Yet much varied are the strands of life, and diverse are their ilk. Some are born of artless yarn, and some of fine-spun silk. Some flee the spindle darkened course, sad shadows to beget. Others flush the scene with strokes of light and live without regret. Some are crossed in all they do and let the mantle slip. Some bind firm will never yield, while others cede the grip. Some are sown to be unseen, and some to stand out bold. Ian McIntosh was blessed as such, for his thread was woven gold. A landmark that would never alter, a constant in an uncertain world, a giving hand that would never falter, a straight stitch among the frayed and curled, a lantern in the darkest hour, an assured beacon at the harbor bar, Moonlight on an unknown road, a compass point, the bright North Star. We are all but a stitch in a square mile quilt that God has sewn together. But some return the light of gold and are lodged in our hearts forever. Rest in peace, Master. We all love you. Thank you for all the times and the memories. And thank you for everyone for celebrating Mac's life here today. For the invited guests, players, friends, the wake is across the road, and I'm sure Mac would want us to celebrate in style. I know for one, I'm definitely going to do that. So those that are going to join us over there, see you shortly. Drive safe. Drive safe.